Welcome to the Mischief. I'm Valen, and this is Create, the 0.5 update. Today I'm going to be teaching you a whole bunch about trains. So I'm giving this little guy a break. I have pulled his train off to the side because we are going to reinstate this train, the main train that we have set up, with one of the other comment brothers currently running this train. And you'll notice he's got like a little hat on him and everything. It's pretty darn cute. Any animal that you take a lead to and you right click on the animal, then you right click on one of the seats, you will then take the animal instantly to that seat, and that's just one way of seating an animal really easily. But otherwise, you'll need to place a train schedule in this critter's possession. Just by right-clicking on them, you will then give them a train schedule. This one already has one because he's got the little hat on. If I take this, he's going to continue on. If I right-click him again, he's going to actually stop. If you don't want them to proceed, you can just take control yourself by clicking on the different controls. But otherwise, you can just right-click on the driver itself and take the train schedule from it. Train schedules, as I mentioned earlier, are made from sturdy sheets and paper. You get 4 of them, and they're pretty useful. It's a good idea to keep a backup just in case. A blank one starts out, well, blank. You have a few options down here. It will automatically default to looping forever. If you add an action, you can then have it travel to a station, you can have it update a schedule title, or limit the maximum speed. In this case, I just want it to travel from one station to the next. This is where you need to know what station you want to go to. And if you don't have more than one station, you're really going to have a problem. You're going to need to have at least 2 destinations for them to have some kind of loop. If you just choose one, it's not actually going to proceed to just keep trying to get to that station because it will already be there. But if we start with Bottom Hill, then we can add another train station here just by clicking in here, and all of them that it knows are available on the server. It will then try and tell you which ones they are. We can choose Mini Station and then continue on. Now there are certain limitations to this. In this case, it says wait 5 seconds. You can add alternative conditions. Anything that you add across here is going to be something that it will do once it stops at a schedule. By clicking on here, it will schedule a 5-second delay before continuing at each stop, or at least at this stop, Bottom Hill. You can then just click in here and change it to seconds, minutes, ticks, and you can click and change it to a different value or just scroll with the mouse wheel. In this case, waiting 5 seconds is fine. If you add in another one, let's add in something like it needs to have a fluid cargo condition. So if you have some cargo on it like this train does, you can then have it take off dependent upon the fluid cargo. And you can have it more than, less than, or exactly a certain amount, number of buckets, and so on. Now, either of these are OR conditions. So it will look for either of these to be true, and then it will continue on, not both of them. If you want an AND condition, so let me delete this one here, so that it will wait 5 seconds, and it will also do something else, like it has to have a player seated. You can have 1 player exactly, or you can have 1 or above players seated in here. Then it will continue after waiting 5 seconds and 1 player is seated. If you don't want it to loop, you just want it to run once, you just click here and take that off. You can also move this around. Oops, I've got it set to Bottom Hill first instead of Mini Station. You just click down here and it will switch that one down, and you can do so if it's a bigger list and so on. You can also skip this. It'll start at the Mini Station, so you can just click here and it'll go to the next one, click there to go back. When you're done, just click the check mark and you've got yourself a schedule. Now as this one I am not sure will actually function properly, we're going to use this one here. This one takes us into the Nether, and it has us cross this other rail system that's going on with another train on it. In this case, we're going to want to go to the depot. That's this really big section we have over here with the really big sign, and it's got some milk set up as well as a whole bunch of train tracks that we're going to be delivering to the Nether. Because, you know, the Nether always needs train tracks and milk. But as the arrow is not currently aiming on that, it says here Nether, and when I scroll up it turns into 2 dots. You can instead have it skip down here like I was mentioning before. That's going to be our next stop. Click yes, and then I'm going to give it back to our comment brother friend. But before he's able to take off, I'm taking control. So I now have control of this train named Subscribe. And we're going to continue on over to another train briefly. This little train here, being driven by one of the comment brothers, is going to be taken over by me. Currently, there is a schedule, and it cannot work. So if I right click, I take the schedule from this comment frog, and it says bottom hill to overlook 2. Bottom hill is here. Overlook 2 is over there. And it's not going to work because we're not actually even on that line. Let's get this frog over in that area. But if I were to give this driver this schedule, you'll notice it gives an error right here. No suitable path to the next scheduled destination could be found. Because specifically we're not at a station, this is actually just some signals right here. So I just drove the train over here and it's having difficulty in understanding where to go because that's not part of the normal route. So let's just back ourselves up over here. And I can give you a little bit of a tutorial on how some of the regular train controls work. If you come up to an intersection like this where the road splits, you can actually aim to the right with your keyboard. In this case, I'm pressing the letter D while pressing W to go forward, and you will actually make the turn. Otherwise, default, you should, in most cases, just go in a straight line. So right now I'm holding W to continue going forward, and I automatically go forward. So that's just one way to do so. If you need the train to divert into another track that's not normal, that's one way of doing it. But as this guy already has a schedule, as you can tell by the little hat on him, and I currently have the control over there, instead I'm just going to click on him, and it says schedule resumed, navigation succeeded, and you can now see that we're going to go at a certain speed, because this is the limitation that I have here, around this little rail system. And it's basically just a loop. There's nothing really fancy with it. It was just so that we could have some interactions with some of the other trains and do a little bit of testing. Something else you should be aware of. There are ways of kind of uprooting your driver from a train. For instance, we've got this one here. He's got a schedule, and I'm in another adjacent seat. If I get out of this seat and I try and take the seat that the driver is in, suddenly the hat is missing. It says driver has gone missing. You can grab a lead, put it here, and then he's back on top and you can see the hat reappears. But otherwise, that is one way of just uprooting your driver, is just taking their seat and pushing them out of it. Then of course you can always just kind of lead them to safety. Here's another frog, and if I take this one and put it in the driver's seat, oh look, the schedule's there. It's whoever is sitting in that seat would end up getting the schedule in that case when you put a new one in there. It's not the actual specific entity. Back over here on train subscribe, we have the original comment brother who is going to resume their journey just by right clicking on them. Schedule is resumed and we continue on our path. Where we're headed? We're actually going to the depot, which is that really large like refueling station over there. We'll take a turn here. The train whistle goes off and we'll stop to refuel. Now in this case, I'm just going to grab the manual controls and then let go of them just so that they stop what they're doing. And we'll have a brief look at these, the display board. Display boards are made with electron tubes and andesite alloy, but that will get you 2 of them, which is rather nice because you also don't use any power to power these, but you do have to have some kind of rotational force going, and it has to be at least 32 RPMs, which is going to be double that of a water wheel. So over here we've got a series of display boards all connected together, and in connecting them they will actually kind of like unite into a single multi-block structure, allowing multiple displays to happen on there. Now you notice this kind of updates as it is real time. This is all stuff that is currently loaded, and it gives you kind of an estimation of when the next arrival is going to happen. With cogs going into the sides of it, it is how it is powered. And if you want to know exactly the level of power that you really need in this case, I have a water wheel over here that's just running at regular speed. I've got a C shape of water running all the way around it, from up here, down, and underneath it, going backwards. And to further demonstrate, I currently have, excuse me, Mr. Comment, I currently have it displaying that the upper section here, which is connected to the larger wheel, is running at 32 RPMs. The 16 RPMs is running directly off the water wheel itself. So just by converting it to one smaller size off of a larger wheel, you then have doubled the speed, and this is efficient enough, effective enough to run your setup. Now, remember, it actually doesn't use any stress. That's what this bar is. You still have full 100% stress on here, as displayed by here. Network stress, low, 0%. 256 remaining capacity. Now, how does one actually use these boards? The simple way is actually taking yourself something like this, a name tag. And by doing so, it will pretty much just put on here what you want it to say. So if I want milk to instead say train track, I just click and that's accomplished. And if I want it to say milk at the top, done and done. And then of course I can just click back on here and change them back as I desire. Now on top of that, you can also use dyes on your board, and whatever information is displayed on that line will stay that color. So if I change milk over to train track, it will still stay red, and you know, you can switch it back as well. If you want it to actually be the specific color that it was before, it's just a default white dye that you'll have to use. So there you go. That's the most basic way that you can have these display boards working. There's a lot more to it by having real-time information being displayed on here according to what is currently docking or coming about. And that is with some of these. A display link attached to something like a train station. Now in this case, I currently have display links also hooked up to something else. But let's take a look at these. Display link is made with a redstone torch, brass casing, and a copper sheet. If I were to put down a couple signs here, this will automatically get powered by this cogwheel that's in place. And I can actually tell it this sign by right-clicking displays information from this train station by just right-clicking on the train station. It will place that train station. Then you can right-click on the display link and tell it what information you want it to display. A train station summary, or a train schedule status. This also works for multiple other things. You can even tell it which lines you want it to display things on. Examples of things might include a variety, one of which is going to be like a clock. If you use a cuckoo clock here, you can click on here, you can put it on the side or back. Accidentally just sneak clicked. If you sneak click, you'll undo your selection of which board it goes to. But you can put it on the side and it will display the time if the cuckoo clock is powered. In this case, it is not. So it's likely to just have some dashes on there once you decide what it is. Time of day, 12 hour, 24 hour, etc. You can have it run a stopwatch and so on. But this isn't going to work unless, of course, the clock is powered as well. But you can see that there's the dashes representing where it is. Now if you want, I could change it to line 2 and it will then display on line 2 as well, and as there's nothing updating line 1, it will still retain the same information. Something else would be a content observer. If I put this down and I sneak click, I can have it recognize that this chest is about halfway full, and then we can have this display link clicking on here, displaying there, and we can say line 1, the amount of matching items, list of matching items, amount of matching fluids, and so on. But in this case, we're just going to say this. 704 items are currently in this chest. And then of course we can do something like a stress or a speedometer, as you saw in the other area. By putting this on here, you can see that there's no stress and there's plenty of capacity, but I could also click on here, then click on the side this, choose line 2, and we can tell it to display different things depending upon what we want. A progress bar, a percentage, the stress in stress units, the total capacity, or the remaining stress units. There we go, remaining quite a bit. So these things are really handy to have and useful for displaying a lot of different information. Of course, that information will have to be accessible, so if your area is not loaded, that could be a problem and it might not display the things that you're looking for. Now in this case, I currently have an item vault and I have a fluid tank. The fluid tank is being pumped with infinite amounts of milk, but you could always have it have different amounts or different liquids even. But I do have a stockpile switch hooked up to a display link showing the results of that. And the same thing for the item vault. I have the stockpile switch and display link being displayed here, which they're all currently loading up the carriage contraption here with all sorts of liquids and items. Let's continue on into the Nether. Something you should be aware of is that if you're not on a schedule, when you drive a train yourself into the Nether, it will not actually resume with you in control of it. You will briefly break control of the train, though you will come through far enough that the train will continue. But if it's on a schedule like this by itself, then you should be good. But something else you should be aware of is that while the train is in hostile territory, you may still take damage even if doors are closed and other issues may come about, because your train is practically see-through, and it will act as such as well. And here is where we're going to discuss a little something different, and that is the train signal. Just by holding one of these, you get a visual representation of the different lines and breaks that are going on. I have several in place currently, some of which are much larger than others, other ones are rather small. Now what these represent are areas that if there's a train in, a neighboring train that's approaching will likely be getting a signal telling it to stop or proceed. If you want to have this displayed a little bit better than just the little tiny red dot that's currently on there, you can have a Nixie tube mounted on top or on the side of it, and it'll display the results appropriately. But let's look in how to actually activate one of these things. If I were to approach a track while holding a train signal, which is a train casing plus an electron tube will get you 4 of these things, you can use it to actually tell different commands. If a train is approaching and going in this direction, and I just click here, targeted track is selected. I can then put down this train signal somewhere nearby. It doesn't have to be too close, but close enough is usually a pretty good idea. And you'll notice that it created this little tiny blue track area. This is a new signal zone, and if you have something crossing it or there's a train in that area, it may trigger some kind of pausing motion for nearby approaching trains. Now if you want it to go in both directions, you can then add another one in the other direction and put it down nearby as well. It will then change this to be a double direction train track signal. So it can be really useful to have that if you have trains going both directions on the same track. But as we're not doing that in this case, I'm just going to eliminate that and we'll continue with this. Now creating this little tiny area that you saw before is not really that beneficial. So what it does, if you are to have, let's say, this large yellow area, this train is currently on the yellow area, and this will stop other trains from entering that area in most general terms. So if I get back on this little train here that I was using earlier, and I try to resume a schedule with this little frog is going to try and continue on. But you'll notice that there may be a slight issue ahead of us. Derailed train. Something that you're going to want to not have ever happen. Remember that previous tip before where you can have your trains moved around? You're probably going to want to use that tip now. It appears this train is no longer sitting on a connected track piece. Right-click using a wrench in order to relocate it to a nearby track. There we go, and you'll notice that it is currently still in good shape, but the train itself caused a derail for the other one, so it's not just going to be going. They're both actually in a little bit of disrepair. Just a quick click and it should be good to go. Just make sure that you're aiming the right direction and you've got enough space for things to fit on the track. There we go. So to avoid things like that, you're going to want to take a look at this train signal. Just by right-clicking on it with your wrench, it'll say allow passage if section fully traversable. If I undo it, it says allow passage if section is unoccupied. So if you have a really long train, you may want to have some of these settings appropriately set so that it's either allowing passage for it to fully travel through as opposed to just the head of the train being in that place, instead of allowing passage if it's just unoccupied. Because the train may be up here, but its cars may still be all the way back there. Also, if you have multiple tracks going on and you've given a schedule to your friend and things aren't moving at all and it looks like it's in place, hold onto a train signal. And if you have multiple trains on the same line, like this yellow line here, and you've got several of them clicked with a wrench so that they're allowing only if the entire train is off of it, that might mean that you have to have all trains off of that one line. You're going to want to avoid having multiple trains on the same line with some settings, and that might be stopping your individual trains from actually taking off on a line if there's one already on it, even if it is way far away. But you will notice that I have one at the start and I have one at an end point. Otherwise, it's just going to take the entire line that you have in place and use that as a representation, which is not going to be really that useful. In this case, it's such a short cut across these two, I opted to just have one over here. I originally tried having one here and there, but then anytime the train tried to stop in here, it was causing me an issue. So I decided, you know what? It's kind of silly to have it stop so that part of it's across the tracks. Let's have it go all the way across, which made things a lot easier. Something else you're going to want to be aware of is that it's very likely you could have some casualties if they're on the track when other trains come around. And it can hurt quite a bit. I was taking probably about 5 or 6 hearts of damage when that happened, and I got hit. And that should just about do it for this episode on Create Trains. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please be sure to give a like, comment, subscribe. Come visit us on Twitch. Don't be afraid to stop by and click the subscribe, notification, or just the follow button. Come and visit us. We stream regularly. Until next time, folks, I'll see ya.